Akariss here, doing another Fire Emblem Heroes video. Today's video is not a surprise to those of you watching on Twitch because I've already kind of gone over this on Twitch, but I wanted to provide my opinion and thoughts on the current state of the Legendary and Mythics for you guys on YouTube who don't follow, so that's what the purpose of this video is. This is kind of fun. It's mostly an opinion piece for fun kind of video, which means don't get too offended if your favorite Legendary Mythic is not in the tier you expect. I'm going to go through every single season. That's both Legendaries and Mythics. This tier list in general is going to be a competitive-oriented general tier list, but weighted towards wherever the Legendaries or Mythics are designed for, which means that Legendaries are heavily weighted towards Coliseum and Arena modes when considering my rankings, and Mythics, like Defense Mythics, are heavily weighted towards AR Defense, and vice versa. Astra and Light are heavily weighted towards offense. I don't consider Chaos in these tier lists, though, because Chaos is vastly different, and that probably deserves its own video, ranking, tier list, etc. Feel free to state your own opinion in the comments below. I'll likely read those, but keep things civil. Let's not get too upset about certain rankings here. The meta is ever changing in this game, and honestly, a lot of things do change, and my opinions, as you'll see from maybe previous months, is yeah, there's been a lot of shifts here, especially with remixes, new releases, and just the meta in general. Moving up and down is these characters like move all the time. So I'm happy to share literally everything within this video, and maybe this will get you thinking about which of these you want long term. And again, this is coming from a F2P top player perspective. It's what I use, what others use, and what works for me and what works for others. So it's mostly data driven, opinion piece, and just for fun, because at the end of the day, you can probably make even the worst of these units work. In fact, many people I know make the worst of these units work, so let's go. As you can see on my left here, I'm actually going to start with the Aether Raids and starting with Anima. Now, Anima's an interesting case. I think it's actually the weakest season in terms of like mythics. And I mean like mythics within their roles. The reason Anima is so weak is because just most of these kind of just suck. Like they kind of like, or are outdated. The thing with the Anima Mythics is they're all pretty much either easy to play against or countered by common things. So for example, Odor is just kind of shut down by Elamine, for example. His Brutal Shell can get turned off. Duma can get shut down by Elamine. So like their defining effects can get shut down, say, by Elamine. So you might think like Elamine is amazing, but we'll talk about her later, just for me to start it off like that. Both Zeros and Odor being melee units doesn't really lend well to most team comp design. I honestly personally use Zeros as kind of like a infantry pulse bot for the other units, and that's pretty good. Odor with Canton as weapon doesn't really do much favors, as the unit just kind of goes in and out and retreats, and you don't want to like let on pressure. So I've definitively put Zeros and Odor in this 7-slot tier. The reason I put them there is because I feel like if there's a new release at 7th slot that actually is supportive in nature, or possibly some just really annoying menace to deal with, that could easily jump into S tier. But as it stands, you just kind of want Zeros and Odor because they're 7th slot. The rest here in Lip are just outdated, but I think as soon as they get remixed, they'll likely get pretty good. Now, Duma and Mira. Mira is just a dancer, and she provides res, which is really good. But Duma is genuinely pretty solid. If he gets off his upheaval, he's creating damage. His weapon Refine is very strong and lends itself to some very powerful one-shots, and the DR even sets up like Wings of Mercy and such. So Duma, even when his upheaval gets shut down, he's still quite a nuisance and hard to deal with. He's definitely more threatening than the rest of this batch, but Mira being a dancer just opens up a lot of flexibility. Honestly, at the end of the day, most of these mythics are kind of and they're just kind of there to provide stats, and that's pretty much it. They're definitely like the weakest within the role, and Anima needs a lot of help. Moving on, though, we're going to go into not the water legendaries, but the dark mythics. We'll talk about legendaries in a moment after the mythics. So with dark mythics, what we have here is better than Anima, but some of the bottom tier dark mythics are probably even worse than Anima mythics. So much so that Sothis is just kind of like a detriment to your defense in a lot of cases. I've seen Sothis go up to enemy units that are running Mystic Boost and just heal the tanks for 6 health. So this is how it is. Yoon and Hell, again, are in dire need of also having remixes. So of course, Sothis is as well, but the other ones in the A and S, as you can see, there is no B tier because there's quite a gap there, are quite serviceable. And honestly, between Node and Medius, I probably consider them equal. Node and Medius, I feel, are equally strong on different types of team comps. Node lends really well to aggressive, Cavline, Pathfinder type teams, while Medius is just very good for Rattle, Catria, Ball type teams instead. Medius still can work in those teams, especially since he has Canto control and gives attack as a boost, which is very strong, but in general, Node is better because of Pathfinder to set up those teams. So equally, I'd consider them pretty strong. I don't lend any sort of advantage to either or. They're both very good and definitively are S. The same kind of applies between Brammy and Triandra. I'd say they're about equal and just depends on the team comp. So Brammy, again, lends better to like ball, corner type teams, while Triandra is better on pretty much everything, any type of team. However, she is kind of upset by the existence of Mila. That's always been like a problem for Triandra compared to the other fairy dancers. So yeah, about equal, just depends on the team comp. Either way, Dark Defense is happier than Anima Defense overall. So if you are, and if you're holding any of the S or the A mythics, you're probably finding some sort of defense that works out for you. That's where we're at with those. Let's move on to Light Mythics. Now, Light Mythics has seen the recent release of Askr, and to be honest, I didn't cover Askr because I was on vacation at that time, but I just consider Askr about equal to what Ash brings in terms of team comps. So Ash provides what I'd say is mobility, while Askr provides utility. I guess you could kind of define that similarly, but essentially Ash can provide the resonance, and he provides the times pulse effects, and he can also work as a melee tank with far save, and Ash can do pretty much the same thing but provide mobility. So because of her like guidance 4 type effect, they're both just interchangeably very good, and I don't really think one is better than the other. I don't even think most people should be even targeting or merging Askr unless you are just a new player and looking for that. Like if you're just like entering AR, or just like you're a new player and you just have Askr, or you just overlaps, you don't have much merges there. Peony, again, definitively S because she just fits into every team comp, and her Gentle Dream and Flower of Joy are just vastly strong. They're just good in every scenario. So I'd say the cow, the bull, and I guess the fairy are there in S. Now, A tier is where things get a bit more complex because some of them can be better than others, but I'd say overall I would put Mila and Uller probably better than Air and Dogger. So Mila still stands as being quite good supportively for most teams. She does lack a little bit, I'd say, on player phase type comps where she's most likely taking some sort of smite role, and that's about it. But she still does provide that extra turn. She's able to provide assist denial through her Nurturing Breath and Mila's Turn Wheel effect. The Nurturing Breath, by the way, provides that 2 stats that kind of seems forgotten, but generally speaking, Mila's pretty solid and really lends well to like just ending a lot of team comp strats. Always been kind of a menace, kind of like the Elamine before Elamine happened for Light Season. Generally pretty good, though not anywhere S tier because again, she doesn't fit nicely into every strategy. Now, my opinion of Uller has definitely changed a little bit. While I thought of actually, she's moved up from where I initially thought of her because the meta has changed. It's one of those units that has gone from like not so great to better. And the reason for that is because we were in like a Pathfinder, say before safety fence, legendary Sigurd calves all over the place meta, and Uller does not do well under pressure. She just literally falls over and dies. She needs too much protection, like far saves and near saves, and if you don't run those on an Uller team, you're gonna have a bad time, and she'll die a lot. She does run really well into a meta where there's corner Catria type teams or just corner balls or save teams, because Uller is actually pretty good at penetrating those types of teams. She can set up and likely pull through, breaking through them because of her weapon. The addition of White Cap Bow also generally makes her pretty strong, and the weapon itself, I believe, also can soak attack and speed with her built-in Life and Death 4 and a Life and Death seal. She can usually take off the attack and speed debuffs off Bright Shrine or chills attack and speed off of offensive units, so she blends pretty well. On top of that, she has some flexible player phase strategies that aren't necessarily clean up or player or like breakthrough, such as Candle Axe Bow, which you can use to recoil her in under 50%. So Uller is solid. I'd say she's pretty high in A. Not so great in enemy phase type strats, but generally speaking, very solid unit. Air and Dogger are more a complex case. I think both of them really appreciate merges. Air can do okay running just like Sparkling Boost Plus and Tamari for support, where she's going to give additional 5 res off Sparkling Boost Plus and Tamari with debuff support. But generally speaking, the more merges you'll add to Air, the more strategies you can use with her. So as somebody who uses a plus 10 Air, I can tell you that Air Force is difficult to use, but still possible. And that comes a lot with high investment and merges. So she gets more flexible the more you can invest into her. And Dogger kind of applies this too. So I have a Dogger myself, and I've not been able to use her almost at all because of her lack of investment. Dogger can do really well, same idea as Air, with more investment, and I do think Pathfinder can lend itself pretty well to some player face strats. But Dogger herself can do superb once she has a very high attack and speed investment, because her built-in no follow-up off her B skill just gives her more options to, let's say, tackle Medius or Note, which there aren't a lot of units that can do that. Finally, Freya is just not where she wants to be. I think she was a bit better in the Pathfinder meta because mobility is really good there, but in this scenario, she's in dire need of a remix. So I'm not really going to say much here about Freya, but if you think that there's something you've been making your Freya use successfully, feel free to let me know in the comments below. She's just too particular. I feel like she needs support through like Valoria, Heavy Blade 4 perhaps, maybe the new Thor with Worldbreaker. There's too many conditions to make Freya work that don't appeal to me in general. So, fortunately lacking compared to the rest. Finally, we get into the finale here. And I'd say these mythics are the best. So you probably are either confused or infuriated by an initial glance of this tier list, but let me explain. So we have Altina in 2 places here. That is not a mistake. And we also have Elamine not an S tier, which is also not a mistake. But let me explain it. This is post Naga remix, by the way. Naga was bottom tier before her remix. Now I think she is safely in the Giga Chad tier, which of course Twitch can just let me know. Guys can share your reactions down there. So the Giga Chad tier is basically just a meme. It's pretty much A tier. And then the A tier can just also be A tier. Like everyone in A tier is pretty much A tier, but I just wanted to make a tier for those because we've had a lot of content with Naga and Altina lately, so I wanted to make sure that was here and in full meme value for you guys also watching on YouTube. But nonetheless, I want to explain the placements of all of these, everything here. Let me first and foremost say that every Astra mythic is very good except Altina. Altina is not good unless you have Winter Bernadetta. That's literally her condition. So if you have Winter Bernadetta, Altina becomes one of the best Astra Mythics you can use. So that's just because you've set up Vantage without having to rely on enemy recoil, hitting you, lightning trap, a bolt tower, or something. You have a consistent way to take that damage off of Bernadetta, Ardent Sacrifice, Reciprocal Aid, and set up Vantage. Once you have that Vantage, Altina with like Twin Blades and possibly Lancina support, it ends up just killing most things in a meta where almost nobody's using Hardy Bearing. So she definitively is up here, assuming you have Bernadetta, and that's why Bernadetta's on the list, because you need her to make Altina function. If you don't have that, Altina is down there where she needs to be in the bottom tier. Everyone else is actually superb. Every single mythic here is really good. No one's lacking. Now, Plume just kind of follows the Peony logic here, which is just flexible, very strong in almost every team comp. You just can really appreciate a dancer no matter what you do. Thor, now in my experience, is also very good in every team comp. As a player phase unit, she's great for enabling Gale Force, running Double Fury on the A slot and the Seal. You can set up her own 50% through 2 combats. A pretty easy Gale Force because she has Slaying Weapon and World Breaker. So most units will crack on the front line, and then she'll be able to just enable the rest of the team to come in and really appreciate her World Breaker support for setting up these amazing player phase strategies. On the enemy phase type teams, she can use stuff like Love Candelabra for attack defense support. She has World Breaker to enable stuff like dragons, casters, tome users, whatever. Thor is definitively up here and is a great unit to pretty much every team. Regan is still up here also in S, as she fits into pretty much every team as well. She mostly, like on player phase strats, will come in and Canto off of a snipe with Wings of Mercy, for example, and then trap and go to just clean up essentially with some big nuke off of Cedar Shell, or even initiate off Gale Force, Canto back, get Dance. There's a lot of really good interactions you can do with Regan. Usually on a tank or enemy phase team, you really appreciate Regan's cleanup utility to get pots or just snipe some key or problem units. Moving on though, the Altina and Naga placements. So as I just mentioned, Altina is just defined and enabled by Bernadetta's wrist effect, set up Vantage, and turn. There's really not much more to that. The lack of Hardy Bearing and mostly not bulky units, especially with Naga providing Divine Fang, just take care of problem dragons like Cyros or Duma, means that Altina is consistently going to sweep teams. Naga, on the other hand, and from my experience this past week using Naga at post remix, as somebody who has a very invested Naga, she's now officially amazing. So as a support unit, you have Divine Fang Plus, which on its own enables a bunch of strategies because of guaranteed follow-up. But now I can actually use Naga as a tank, like a melee tank, because she has built-in DR. She appreciates Dragon Wall. She gets plus 14 to stats off of her weapon, Refine. She has enhanced damage off like the Dragon Rad DR type effect. She can, because if you use her as a tank, you have the extra slot on your team to support her. She just has so many things going for her that she's quite strong now. I don't think I'd put her up here in S, but she's very strong, especially once invested. And I'm planning to upload some footage, some shorts or something like that in the coming week, so you can see for yourself exactly what I've been doing with Naga. Of course, that's all on Twitch as well, so you can just come into Twitch, maybe watch a VOD or say hello. Either way, finally we're rounding out this tier list with this Mythic and Astra tier list with Elamine and Shara. Now, on first impression, you might think they're not, why am I considering them so low? But they're very strong Mythics, but they're more specific. One thing you'll notice is that the more useful a Mythic is, like not niche, but just can be used for a variety of teams and is generally useful all the time, is why I would rank certain mythics higher than others. By that logic, Elamine and even Ashera can be the all-stars and best mythics on your team, but only against specific enemies that you run into. Like, they can win you the games, but they're not always going to be useful. And that's why I feel like Elamine and Ashera are not definitively S tier, because Elamine is literally useless against a lot of teams where she doesn't do anything with either her false start effect on the staff or her DR effect off of the C skill. She's literally useless in player phase strats because she cannot use Smite, she can use Wrathful and Dazzle, but then she gives up Trace, which is also really nice to have. So the lack of that either mobility or lack of firepower makes Elamine not so great. If you chose to, let's say, run her in like a player phase strat, let's say a Gale Force strat, and you wanted her to like contribute with Wings of Mercy, you'd have to like replace her staff with something that has Wrathful on it because her staff has Dazzle, use Wings of Mercy, and then try to snipe with Elamine, which is just like every other mythic is going to do it better. So she just doesn't lend well to that. She can't smite for those type of strats either. So Elamine really shows her colors when she's not actually shutting down like a Bridal Catria or shutting down a Duma, or just when she's not literally false starting something, or you're not save ball and turn tanking. And if we weren't in such a save turn meta, I would feel like Elamine would actually be the worst mythic of like everything, perhaps, because then you just wouldn't find much use for her. And that's a bold statement. Some people are going to really vastly disagree with that. That's okay. But once you use Elamine, you'll see what I mean. There's just going to be teams, you're going to be teams you run into where she doesn't do anything, and you won't want her on that. People who have like a high merge Elamine that are forced to use her in like player phase strats, she's a liability. Ashera is a different case, but I do think she actually lends well to most team comps, and that's due to at least she has like Null Panic and the attack Res 6 support. That's very strong even if she's not necessarily doing something herself. She follows a sort of Uller mentality here, which means that she's really squishy, like easy to kill, but she does have high nuke potential, good support. Generally speaking, also pretty good at cleanup. So I don't feel like Ashera's like bottom tier here. It's just that everyone of all the Astra mythics are just superb. So she just naturally falls at the end here. There's not really much negative things I could say for Ashera. She just kind of feels like Uller, but is a magic user instead and has some support capabilities. But she's not bottom tier despite what you might be looking at here. The definitive bottom tier unit here is Altina without Bernie. If you don't have Bernie, Altina is suffering. And that's speaking from someone who's used Altina for many years. All right, so a quick review here if you missed it. And then we'll jump into the Water Legends. All right, Water Legendaries. So to reiterate, this tier list, the Legendaries, will be weighted towards Arena and Colosseum. So the more unit scores, and now that we have preference B300 SP skills and dragons with this encounter in the seal, that does change things a bit around, as you'll see as we jump into some of the other legendary tier lists. But generally speaking, the weight here does consider arena, but also ether raids and where they could potentially be used in, say, air offense, air defense, and something like summoner duels and a little bit of PvE content. So as you see, Chrom is not dethroned. If anything, he probably ascends higher because of the fact that his change fate and a preference, not a preference B, but like a 300 SP B skill just kind of puts him above. Like he just goes higher than everyone else because he has a thing that's completely unique to him that makes him score even more. So Chrom in terms of scoring, ascended. Chrom in AR, super good. Chrom in everything, super good. Change fate in arena when nobody else can use positional skills, up here. I don't really need to speak more about Chrom. As soon as this guy ends up on Remix, or if you have Fed Pass, you should already be considering him as like the first legendary you should build up, because he's just that good. And his dual version also speaks for volumes for, again, how good he is and what he brings to the table. Now, Water's in an interesting spot because all of the legendaries in the S tier are good. I used to think pretty lowly of Dimitri, but he has gone better just because of new skill options that have just been released. He also naturally falls better into such modes like Summoner Duels, but generally speaking, Dimitri's better off than he was pre-Vital Astra, pre-Speed Smoke 4, pre-Fallen Lilith with no follow-up. There's just a lot of stuff that you can give Dimitri to make him just so much better. That doesn't help Fjorm, so Fjorm is down there in the bottom, while Dimitri benefits highly from a lot of those things I mentioned. Therefore, that bumped him up quite a bit. The other ones in the S benefit from, let's say, the 300B skill being inheritable. It doesn't affect someone like Sheeta, for example, but it does help out, let's say, Byleth and Azura. And Azura's Prayer Wheel and Null Panic effect, the Grey Waves 2, are all nice things, nice upgrades for her. Byleth is definitely really solid. However, I again don't think he's up to the level of Chrom. Despite Byleth's support and despite his nuking potential, he's just you can't really compare him to Chrom. Chrom's just Chrom. The S tier water legendaries are just good in different areas, so I just consider them equally strong. If anything, Leaf and Azura might be a little bit weaker than the rest here, but for the most part, they're all very good for different reasons, and therefore I just blankly put them all in S. The rest of the legendaries in water are just a little bit lacking. Erica's good, so she's just a little bit lower than the rest. Having Kanto, having, I believe, True Damage off her B are all nice additions. Kanto control makes her weaker, but generally speaking, she's still very good. Rielmo's fallen off a little bit, and Fjorm's just sadness. It can be used in a bonus season, but generally speaking, you're not going to be impressed having someone like Fjorm merged up. Next up is the Wind Legendaries, and I don't really feel like I need to explain Sigurd the same way I need to explain Chrom, because Sigurd is just ridiculous for the exact same reasons that Chrom is. Sigurd just has 4 movement and nobody else has that, and then he can also enable everyone else to also have extensive movement. So Sigurd is just definitively the king of Wind Season, just like how Chrom is the king of Water Season. The rest, an interesting thing you can also think about here is that Sigurd can now have access to both Crusader's Ward and the Kanto Rem sword off of Rickard, but I don't really know if that is actually as good as it sounds, but it's just something to consider, because you could always use Trace in the B. Anyways, with the rest of this list, I did have Lyn, I think, in the previous list at the bottom. The thing with Lyn is that this list does consider beyond Arena and Coliseum modes, and if it was strictly Arena and Coliseum modes, Lyn would still be bottom tier. But when it comes to AR, and especially AR defense, potentially even Summoner duels, because I have ran into some Lyns for Summoner duels, and I mean that version of Lyn, she's actually pretty good. It's actually solid middle there. Not like anyone in the A tier, but definitely middle. The A mythics, A legendaries here have definitely some have gone better, some just haven't really changed. Lucina benefits from the addition of the 300 SPB skills. Myrrh is now like one of the highest scoring legendaries thanks to Distant Counter Dragon Seal, but also benefits really well from that since her A skill is now open to use stuff like her Unity, I believe, or just a stance skill. Very nice addition for her. Micaiah and Byleth are interchangeably very good for different reasons. So Micaiah has a Desperation effect, which I think is very solid, and Byleth has built-in Oath, but more importantly, I think there's a null follow-up effect there. So I forgot it was on the Tome or the C skill. I don't remember exactly, but either way, they're all very strong in A as nukers, cleanup type units. The utility of Future Vision cannot be denied, so again, it's pretty similar to Chrom, but not on the level of Sigurd. Anyways, looking down here, I do feel like Legendary Khorne has really benefited from the addition of the Distant Counter Dragon Seal, because the A slot taking up the slot for Khorne was always kind of a problem, because she really wanted something like the stance skills or like a Unity or Solo or something, and now that is not a problem anymore. You can combine those two, and Khorne also scores a lot higher because, of course, the Distant Counter Dragon Seal. And because she's also a trainee, she just has additional stats, she does end up scoring higher than somebody around her time was released. So Corrin is in a better spot. She's not that great anywhere beyond that, though. I've seen some tanking strats that involve Corrin, and generally speaking, I believe I guess you could use her for like air offense. She's kind of a letdown in my experience using her in arena. She's not that great there, and some tanking she's been okay, but generally speaking, not the greatest of individual performing units and no support utility. Whereas Gunthra and Eliwood have that support utility. Eliwood benefits from the 300 SPB skill for a score increase and has great support options. Looking forward to what they do, of course, for his remix. That could easily bump him up to something like A, depending on what they add, because a bonus tumbler type effect is nice. Frid is... Frid is in the same season as Sigurd, and there's just not a lot of reasons to use Frid when Sigurd can just give movement to the whole team, where Frid is just like, I'm going to give guard, or I'm going to splash guard and try to be a nuker. It's just not really what you want to be doing as a legendary, unfortunately. Melee calves just don't really stand out well. Okay, Fire Legends. So I did use Roy quite a bit, and he's okay. He still gets his own tier, but he's not like amazing post remix. It's just kind of okay. So he might be better than Celica. So Celica might be below him here, but I like Roy being in his own tier, so I just kept him in his own tier. Eitri is still the best Fire Legend. Not really gonna change that around. I think she's not like Sigurd or Chrom level, like somebody could surpass her post remix or just new edition for sure, but she's still pretty solid, pretty up here. The addition of Xander is interesting, but he's not necessarily game-breaking in any mode. I don't think I've even seen him more than like once. Played him maybe in Summer Duels once, and that was it. He died to a note, so yeah. Not that impressed. Yeah, I don't. There's not really much to say with these guys. I mean, they're all different for different reasons. You kind of want to use Marth as like a tank. Ephraim's nice as like a Kanto nuker. Hit and run team's pretty good. Or Gale Force. Celica's good as like a defense nuker. She'll be even better post remix. Lena is good for like half lines. Could also work for PV and ARO teams. Xander can work as a tank. Roy is good for Gale Force strats. Could also work as a tank. Unfortunately, the biggest losers here are probably Hector and Edelgard. Lack of mobility and being armors is just a kind of curse at this point, both Farina and such. However, I do think that Edelgard benefits from, like, let's say, the guaranteed follow-up effect that Naga has. So if you don't have, like, Summer Edelgard, you can actually use Legendary Edelgard with Naga, for example, to do some really nice setups for Astra season. So that's like an example of Legendary Edelgard still being pretty unique and pretty strong. But like as an arena unit, she's pretty awful. Hector, again, has decent support through Osteopulse, but just the lack of mobility is what's killing him, and he can't really use save skills either. Neither can Edelgard. Like, they're both, like, Edelgard wants to be solo, or you kind of remove a Raging Storm. It's just like awkward usage on them, and that just puts them at the bottom here. All right, that brings us to the finale here, which is Earth Season, Earth Legendaries. So Ike is there where he needs to be, the free unit tier, just like Fjorm. That's what that is. Use a free unit, you're gonna just cry. Seliph right above, both red swords. Seliph kind of needs his remix. He's like in a season where he really doesn't want to be in a season. With units that have like no follow-up, quad, or just blue, littered with blues. Like, there's not even a green in his season. It's just kind of sad for Seliph, and kind of sad for Ike too. Julia is really hurt by the addition of a 300 SPB and just encountered Dragon Seal, which just took away a lot of her scoring potential. She's still solid, I think, as a nuker for, like, let's say, air defense, but nothing too special. Grima moves up a little bit because of her addition of 300 SPB, and Distant Counter Dragon Seal helps her score. It's not really great to run double Distant Counter, and both Grima and Tiki are kind of cursed with that, but it's still a score increase, which means less trouble ranking in Arena, and that needs to notably be mentioned here, despite it being awkward. But that's still here, and Grima otherwise is pretty good outside of Colosseum modes, like Arena as a tanking unit, still gonna not be that disappointing. Faye, just like Myrrh and Tiki and Korn, all really benefit from the Distant Counter Dragon Seal and the addition of the 300 SPB. That just really makes them score astronomically better. The addition of more 300 SP seals will help others get up to speed, but the fact that somebody like Faye and Korn and Tiki all have like these trainee additional BST and they score higher type things just really helps them be definitively up there when it comes to picking your legendaries and where they need to be. Alm, you might come as a surprise, like why he's not up here as like the S tier, but generally speaking, I haven't been too impressed with Alm, both in Sims and as in practice, like playing against him. While he was already good, I think that the Refine and Remix just made him better, but not necessarily like S tier better. It just made him from like B or C up to A type better. His biggest weakness is DR, and it unfortunately stays his biggest weakness. He can't fire off a Lunar Flash every single time to deal with it. He's going to have a big nuke off of a Lunar Flash for sure, but it's not going to be some astronomical huge number that's just going to put him over the top that you just can't deal with him. So DR is still a problem for him, but it's less of a problem, and therefore that weakness brings him up a tier for sure. Not up to S though, not in my opinion at least. Finally, with the S tier, I do think Claude is still the best one of Earth Legendaries, and Nana is no slouch either because she does pierce DR, which is still very unique among melee units, and she does have Kanto, I guess. Tiki is someone that I might feel is an A tier. She's kind of definitely the bottom of S, but she's very strong now. She scores really well. She benefits from the 300 SPB. The Distant Counter Dragon Seal makes her score better. It's kind of suffering to do double Distant Counter, but you don't have to use her to carry, let's say, your Colosseum Arena games. You can just use her to score. She has not let me down in AR and summoner duels. It defends, offense. She just honestly why I put her in S, because I can use Tiki everywhere, and as someone who uses Tiki everywhere, she really hasn't let me down. She has build flexibility, savvy fighter, hardy fighter, slick fighter, whatever. They're all very good builds for Tiki. She's just good. She's not weak to like wind sweep. She's not weak to a lot of things. She's just a good unit, and that's why she's up here in S. She could move down to A depending if the meta is more dragon hate, but generally speaking, I think she's up there where she needs to be. Alright, and that pretty much covers my updated Mythic and Legendary tier list. For sure, I'm sure that many of you guys are not going to agree with what's here, and you might have your own experiences and opinions. Again, that's what the comment section is for, so feel free to share. Keep things civil, and remember, it's just my experience and thoughts here. Gonna try to upload you guys some Naga content, because Naga is now awesome. I like Naga. And that's gonna be it from me in today's video. If you appreciate and you made it all the way out here to the end of the video, then the least I can ask for is a thumbs up. Thank you to my Patreons and supporters on Twitch. Those of you sticking around for YouTube, love you all. And I'll see you in the next video very soon. Peace.